Joshua walked into the room. "How's the coffee?" he said. "It's fine," said Charlene. "Is it hot enough?" Joshua asked. Charlene took a sip. "Yes, it's hot enough," she said. "Good," said Joshua, and meant to make himself some tea. If you want me to be interested in that dialogue right there, I had so better know that the coffee is poisoned. As an editor, I see the same thing, the same problem over and over again with longer sequences of dialogue. And what the problem boils down to is quite simply, they're really boring. And there are a couple of reasons that they are boring. The first and biggest reason is simply that they are inconsequential, or that I like to call them stage directions which go alongside them, are inconsequential. Things like, poisoning aside, talking about the coffee, or lifting your cup to take a sip, or if you're walking along in winter saying, "She shivered because it was cold." Yes, we know it's cold. We don't care. We don't need to remind us as readers. Instead, it needs to be important. In fact, there are two things that every single longer exchange of dialogue should have, and most shorter exchanges too, which are, it should move the action forward, and it should reveal character. And a lot of the time it should serve other functions as well, such as giving commentary or description on what's going on or the people that it's going on with, or providing comic relief. When I was in college, I actually took a drama course, and in the drama course we did 1-minute monologues. And something my drama teacher said has always stuck with me, which is, whenever you're doing a monologue, no matter how short it is, you should always have a moment where the audience is meant to laugh, and a moment where the audience is left it should cry. And although not every very short exchange of dialogue needs to have this, I do think it's an important thing to remember. Having a book be one note, have it be all funny or all serious, gets boring. It's the juxtaposition of different moods and different styles that lends depth to precisely those feelings and those emotions. It makes them matter. But let's get back specifically to dialogue. When I talk about stage directions in dialogue, this is a problem that I see a lot, and in addition to not being very interesting, it can actually be quite confusing for the reader sometimes. I sometimes see entire books starting this way with a chapter that is 90% dialogue and 10% he stood up and closed the door, he sat down and sipped his coffee, he took another sip of coffee, he took another sip of coffee. Like, yes, I get that he likes coffee, or at least is sipping it for some reason. So, in order to avoid the boredom, the first thing to do is to look at a scene of dialogue and ask yourself, if I took this entire scene out of the book, would anything really change? Would I lose something essential to the book? This is a lot of the same thing that I talked about, by the way, in my video on action, that action sequences should be essential to the book, or they should be deleted. Same with dialogue. If you took it out, would it matter? And by the way, an interesting tip here is, if you're having trouble writing, if you're good at writing action scenes and have trouble with dialogue scenes, you can always write one like the other. Approach a dialogue scene like an action scene. Each character in the scene has a motivation, and they're going to try and get it done. But instead of trying to get it done with guns and physical actions, they're going to try and get it done with words. You'll see this, a combination of this in action films a lot, because if you have a scene which is just literally people sitting down and talking, such as, "Oh, how's your relationship going?" The action movie, which will want to keep things moving, will instead put this conversation during an action scene. So they're repelling from the building and about to break in, and suddenly one of them asks to the other, "Hey, so how's the relationship going?" And the other one's like, "Is this really the time or place for this?" And of course it's not, but it makes it fun and interesting, and it gives that juxtaposition, it gives that little bit of humor in what's otherwise a serious scene. So you can do this, but you don't have to do this, because since the dialogue itself should be moving the action along, the dialogue itself can be the action scene. To give an example, I am in fact going to pick a scene that is entirely dialogue. And despite being entirely dialogue, it is also absolutely riveting and absolutely matters. And to do this, to really cut out all the extra stuff, which I'll talk about a little bit more, I want to turn to manga, specifically to the second Death Note book. So spoilers for that if you haven't read it, and if you have no intention to reading it, don't worry, I will explain what you need to know and what makes it such a brilliant, quite long dialogue exchange that matters so much, that reveals characterization, that gives commentary, and that does in fact have bits of humor. So, a little bit of background. The premise of Death Note is that our main character, Light, has found a Shinigami's notebook, and if he writes a name in that notebook while visualizing the person's face, the person will die 40 seconds later. And Light has been using this to kill off criminals to try and make the world a better place. Now, of course, the police aren't too keen about him murdering all these criminals, although the public does seem to like him and starts calling him Kira, which is more or less what the English word killer sounds like if you say it with a Japanese accent. So although some of the public are lauding him, the police are trying to figure out who is Kira, how is he killing all these criminals, and how can we stop him? Whereas Light is of course trying to keep his identity secret while trying to build his new world order via mass murder. Well, technically serial killing, but they call it mass murder in the books. So, this is our setup. Now, Light's father is actually the person in charge of the Kira Light force in the police station, and one day Light goes to the police station to deliver something to his father, only to discover that no one from the task force is there. But he does overhear a conversation with a young woman who has appeared at the police station, and she claims to need to talk to the task force because she has essential information for bringing down Kira. And the Shinigami, this is important also, the Shinigami who owns the notebook follows Light around, and only Light can see and hear him. And the Shinigami himself states straight out what the stakes of the scene are, which is, if this woman actually has such information, that could be lethal for Kira. So these are our stakes. Light has to figure out if she has the information, and if she does, he has to stop her, or the police will figure out who he is and take him down, and he will probably be executed. On the other hand, we have this young woman whose motivation is to bring down Kira, who killed her fiancé. But at the same time, although she's very bright and she has these ideas of how to find Kira, she's not entirely confident in them, and so she wants someone to validate her ideas. These are our two motivations, and the Shinigami, it just wants to be amused, essentially, and is leaving commentary on them. So the scene matters. Let's start the scene. They're in the police station. Do we need a lot of details about the police station and like that? No, the only thing we really need to know is that there are security cameras, and so Light wants to leave the police station. So, there are of course drawings here because it is manga, but the drawings are for the most part just them. And I'd like to imagine that if it was written as a novel, it wouldn't be like, her coat shifted as she looked at him, or he looked back at her. Instead, we only have the essential bits, many of which are brought through dialogue. When Light first engages with this woman, he is charming. He's just like, hey, da-da-da. And the Shinigami actually comments on this, giving us commentary and character analysis. Who is this person who is acting like this? Who is this charming young man? Because up to this point, we've been told a bit that Light is charming, and we know that he is a top student and he's intelligent. But all the real interactions that he's had that show his manipulation, that show his charm, have been from a distance or have just been told to us. This is the first time that we have really seen it ourselves, and the commentary from the Shinigami just backs up how unusual this behavior is compared to how Light acts in private. So Light becomes very charming, and he gets the woman to walk outside with him, and he suspects that she might indeed have information that could prove fatal, and so he uses a very simple but intelligent tactic, which is, "Hi, my name's Light, what's your name?" And she gives him her name, and he writes it down in the death note. Again, this is not a stage direction. In the text, we need to know he is writing it down on, well, technically a piece of paper torn from the death note, and then he is looking at his watch. Not stage directions, these are essential. We don't need to know if it's windy. We don't need to know what color her hair is. We don't need to know that they walked a few more steps. We need to know that he wrote down her name and that he looks at the watch and that she notices him looking at his watch. You don't actually have to put that part. And 40 seconds pass and she does not die. And Light realizes this is a careful, cautious, intelligent woman. She gave a fake name. And as they continue to talk, he realizes that she does indeed have essential information for the police that could prove lethal to him. So her motivations, she likes this young man. He's around 17 at this time. She likes this young man. She wants to prove her theories, but his motivations have become very sharp, which is, I have to kill this woman, and I have to do it before she gets back to the police station, and she's going to turn back within a couple of minutes. But she's already given me a fake name. How do I get her real name from her when she knows that Kira can kill if he has a name? When she's already cautious, when she's already given me a fake name? And furthermore, so the Shinigami in the background is sort of like, well, you can do this. But Light is determined, again showing character through his thoughts. Thoughts count as dialogue, in some ways. Through his thoughts, we see what he actually thinks of this woman, and we see that he is determined to beat her through dialogue, not through making a deal with the Shinigami, not through physical violence. He is proud and he is determined. And he succeeds. While they are walking together at the last moment, he does indeed charmingly manipulate her into giving him her name. And again, so here our non-stage directions are the fact that they turned back towards the police station. That's all we really need to know. And then, again, that once he gets her real name, he writes it down in the notebook, and he keeps checking her watch. And of all parts of the scene, the one that is most essential to the series as a whole comes next, and it comes through dialogue. Because she says, "Why do you keep checking your watch?" And at the very last second, at the very moment before the 40 seconds are up and his victory is complete, he says, "Because I'm Kira." He gloats in the moment of victory. He wants her to know he's won, and he is absolutely confident that he has won. And he gloats before the death note takes hold to kill her. This matters. The reader needs to know this. It needs to be set up for later. It tells us so much that is essential to his character, and also to the person that he is becoming through using the death note. We already knew some things about him, but this is essential. We've seen her character, we've seen his character, we even learned a little bit more about the Shinigami. It pushed the plot forward. There were a few moments of comic relief and commentary, especially from the Shinigami, but also in Light's thoughts. And there was no fluff, nothing inessential. It was a supreme action scene, almost entirely done through dialogue. Go and do likewise. But before I go, as an editor, I must go in, at least briefly, to the concept of dialogue tags. Because this is something that a lot of people get right, except once in a while they don't. And I have come across a couple of published books which, well, I can't help but notice I found them fairly unreadable. So dialogue tags. Our CMO, Jeannie, actually likes to refer to dialogue tags as part of the punctuation, and that's not a bad way to think about it. A dialogue tag is part of the same sentence as the dialogue that preceded it, and is separated from the dialogue by typically a comma, although occasionally an exclamation mark or a question mark. A dialogue tag is simply a noun, either the pronoun or the person's name, that refers to the speaker, plus a speaking verb. So, she said, he replied, Jeremy explained, Susan answered. All of these are speaking words. You can speak or you can say or reply or tell or exclaim, but mostly say. Mostly have say. Words, you cannot smile words. You can arguably laugh or hiss words, but you cannot sit down words. You cannot look in the mirror words. So an example of a proper dialogue tag would be, my goodness, that's a long list, comma, end quotation marks, space, lowercase h, he said. Not, my, that's a big camera, comma, he smiled. Instead, you need to have he smiled as a separate sentence. So, my, that's a big camera, period, end quotation marks, capital H, he smiled. And I'll put a cheat sheet up here to help you out. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please consider subscribing, liking, and ringing the bell notification button. And don't forget to check out my new book, Bargaining Power, available now on Amazon.